Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Specifying Practice Group webinar. Our topic for today is Managing Multiple Work Package Specs. Our thought leaders are Dave Stutzman and Louis Metcalf. Dave is a registered architect, certified construction specifier, and founding principal of Contractor, a specifications and quality assurance consulting firm. Dave will be a speaker at the Construction Specifier Academy, February 24th through 26th in Dallas, Texas. Louis is an architect, certified construction specifier, new grandfather again, and manages the specifications and quality assurance programs for Gresham Smith and Partners, a national architecture, engineering, interiors, and planning firm. For more information on the CSI Academies and webinars, please visit csinet.org. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. Your participation during today's webinar is encouraged, and we have allowed time to take questions throughout the presentation. Although attendee lines are muted, you may click the Raise Hand button to indicate that you have a question or comment. We will identify you by name and unmute your line, at which point you may begin speaking. If you are participating via streaming audio and do not have a computer microphone, you may also type your question into the chat box. Dave and Louis, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is I'm Louis Metcalf. I'm speaking from my office here in Nashville, Tennessee, and my co-chair, the leader of this endeavor is Dave Stutzman. Dave, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Specifying Practice Group. And I'm joining Louis, and we're not sitting across the table from each other. I come to you from beautiful southern New Jersey.
Okay. The subject for the day is talking about managing multiple work package specs. And this is not a formal lecture by any means, and what Dave and I really want this thing to happen is become almost like a talk show. And so if you have questions or comments, suggestions, ideas, please feel free to pass them along as we're going through the presentation so that we can do this. To me, the whole genius of CSI is that we have folks out in the trenches who have found maybe a better way to do something or have some ideas to save time or money and share that concept with other people. And that's one of the things that excites me about being a member of CSI, which I joined in October 1982. You can do the math yourself. Okay, so the first thing to do is we have a poll question, and Jessica, would you please ask poll question number 1. How many of your projects use multiple work packages?
Louis, it's nice to see today too that we have a good number of people logged on with us that have turned into being pretty regular participants, and I want to thank all of you for joining us because it's nice to see some familiar faces back month after month. And knowing that, I'm sure we'll get a good number of comments and questions today.
Well, we hope so. Okay. Have we got some results?
Well, I see that we have 11% say that they are not using multiple packages, and 71% are some. We don't have anybody that says all. We have another 18% at most. So it looks like the vast majority is at least some packages.
Okay, well, that's kind of consistent with what we're seeing across the country and talking with other friends around the country. It seems like more and more projects are having at least one early release package, 1 or 2, and more, there's a greater drive to shorten the construction time, and by doing that by fast-track construction. Before we get started on how to do that, though, let's take a minute to say, well, what does the code say about the concept of not having a full set of drawings for the building official to review? And as you can see here, there's a section in the IBC that talks about phased approval that authorizes the building official to to issue partial permits for portions of the work, but it does not require the building official to do so. And in other webinars and presentations that I've done on this subject, I stress that before you get started on something like this, you may need to talk to the local guy, because if you're planning 10 or 12 work packages, you know, your contractor may want to string this thing out, especially if it's a large, complex project. You may need to talk to the local building officials and see what they're willing to put up with in terms of the extra costs and the inefficiencies of reviewing those. But anyway, it is a concept that the code recognizes, and we just need to figure out how to do it. So that's the challenge. The whole point, of course, is that we're going to be issuing foundation drawings before we have the interior drawings finished, and there's a lot of overlap in there. And then as the drawings evolve and the design is moving forward, we will update those documents with additional content or change and even revised content that we've already put out on the street for construction. So the design team has to manage multiple versions or revisions of individual documents, and this is what we're going to talk about today. Try to give you some ideas, share some ideas of what works and what doesn't work so good. And unfortunately, at the moment, there is no practical guidance from AIA or CSI on how to do that. The AIA Handbook of Professional Practice has a 10-page article on fast-track construction, but it does not have a single word of practical advice on how to do it. So David and I are going to be soliciting the technical committee at CSI to see if they would be interested in producing a practice guide on this subject. Dave?
Well, Louis, I was wondering, you mentioned the code permits the phased application for permitting. Is there any guidance from the code as to the kinds of permits that are normally allowed?
No, not really. That chapter is one that we probably should read at least once a year, because it talks about the kind of the completeness of the documents. But one of the things that we'll be discussing shortly is, what does the plan reviewer need to know? Because obviously they're a little reluctant to approve plans for foundations that are going to be cast in concrete, no pun intended, long before they know if the exiting will work, the life safety plan. So those kinds of things need to be negotiated up front and worked out with the building officials so that the project goes smoothly.
It's always good to have them on your side once you start digging.
Absolutely, and talk to them up front. That communication is the thing. So here's some of the considerations. Here's some of the things that we need to think about as we figure out how we're going to do this. One of the things, and this is exactly what I mentioned, is we have to let everybody know what can and can't be built from the set of documents in this work package. There's obviously very important legal reasons, and we all know that as we're doing drawings, the drawings are going to, and specs, there are going to be things in those documents that go a little bit beyond what we really are authorizing the contractor to build out of the current set. And so the question is, what work is covered by the seals for this portion of work? And again, the documents will have information that doesn't apply to the current work package, so because the design process is always going to be slightly ahead of what's actually issued for construction. And it's really not practical to try to hide those things. So if you're doing a a building section for one of the early release packages or earlier packages in the project, you may have some elevations of some of the interior walls because you're already thinking, oh well, I need some glass office fronts here and I need some wood paneling there, but obviously that's not going to be ready for another 2-3 work packages.
But Louis, going back to the building officials, I'm sorry to keep harping on this.
No,
but,
that's all right.
It seems, though, that the point of the design being ahead is something that's really a necessity, because if you're applying for an early foundation permit, the building official is certainly going to want to know what the superstructure is going to be before he even issues that foundation permit. So I'm not seeing that that's a disconnect necessarily, but almost a necessity.
Oh yes, absolutely. And in terms of our own figuring out the design, obviously we need to make sure that our life safety plan works up front before, again, we go casting foundations in concrete. We certainly don't want to be jackhammering concrete out to create another stair tower or something like that. So yes, we do need to know in advance, and one of the things that as we're going to talk about here and see is that we need to have a plan for what information is needed at what time, and then obviously some of those things have to be thought out in advance. Even though we don't have all the stair towers maybe fully designed in detail, we at least need to know where they are and what their capacities are. So, and one of the considerations then is that we have these multiple documents and we have multiple versions, and we need to know, everybody needs to know what is the most current version. So the question is, what information about individual documents do the users need to know to be able to fulfill this consideration? And that's one of our points of discussion. I've been calling these things work packages, but that's not the only thing that they're called. And there are a couple of some alternative terminology. Early release package is a very common one, because a lot of projects will have at least a site development, maybe underground utilities package or 2 packages that go out, and then even though the rest of the building, foundations through interior design, might be in a single group of drawings.
The early release, though, does that imply that we also have a late release or a just-on-time release?
I think the just-on-time release. It doesn't imply that, yeah, there's some stuff that we can do early up front, and we'll give you the rest of the stuff later. But that's a kind of it's a little too limited to use for a general thing. These are really for a specific use. And then we have this term, pricing package. Now that one is I think really more appropriate for when we're issuing partial sets of documents to the contractor for preliminary cost estimating purposes or value analysis or whatever. And it's not really appropriate for contract documents, or at least that's the way I see it.
Right. Yeah. It seems that once you label it pricing package only, that you're limiting its particular use, and that if it's really meant for construction, how do you make that correlation with the contract documents?
And of course, one of the scary things about pricing packages in particular is that they are often sent out not under seal. We get the contractor gets its subcontractors and suppliers to give them hard prices, and then when we issue our sealed documents that are not identical, the contractor wants to come back to the owner for additional money. we all know that these preliminary pricing packages wind up being a bid package rather than just an estimating exercise to make sure we're on track with the budget. Another term you hear sometimes is bid package, but really from the owner's position and everything we do, our drawings, our specifications are in effect a communication from the owner to the contractor, instructions on what to do, what to build. And from the owner's position, this is really sub-bidding because the contractor has already presumably had some arrangement, whether it's a GMP or a cost-plus arrangement, to get its contract with the owner. But you do see this phrase from time to time, and nobody's going to get sued over it.
Don't you think that maybe this is the result of a lot of new or a lot of current projects being delivered through a CM process where really it could be considered a bid package because he's taking multiple bids for a particular class of work or trade?
Well, that would kind of depend, David. If it's a CMC, construction manager, constructor contract, then no, it's still doing sub-bidding. But you're quite right. If it was a construction manager advisor project, then yes, the construction manager acting as the owner's agent is in fact competitively bidding the work that would be done in that given work package. Either way, that you can see the importance of having really a tight set of drawings that everybody knows exactly what to bid on so that we get the best price. It's been a while since I've done a CMA project, and sometimes I forget about those. I actually think that's the best way to build a building, but that's my little personal viewpoint.
We have a question or comment from Thomas Smith.
Okay.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Louis, Tommy Smith.
Hi, Tommy.
How are you today?
Okay.
See, when I was working with the FedEx Forum here in Memphis, it was done with multiple packages, and they used the term construction issue, which, and they generally refer to them colloquially as CIs, but I think it's critical, whatever you call these packages, that they have a meaning and be consistent throughout the project, so people get into the idea of what the package being called actually means. So I think it's more critical to have the package, people understand what's going on than it is necessarily the name of it. Just be consistent with whatever name of the nomenclature is used.
I agree with you completely, Tommy, and thanks for that comment. One of the considerations that I mentioned, or one of the challenges I should say, that we mentioned earlier, is that we don't have much in the way of guidance from AIA on how to do this. So there's nothing in the A201. There's no defined contract term. And one of the little pieces of advice that I'm going to pass on to folks is that I always put a definition of what I like to term a work package, but it could be a construction issue or just simply issue or construction package. There are a number of different names that we can use. But Tommy is quite right. We need to define that term as in the contract documents and then be consistent with how to use it. Dave, why don't you talk about this, because apparently this gets used a lot in your area of the world.
It does, and it goes back to the comment that Tommy made, and what we're doing is just labeling each issue usually by number, and it keeps it fairly simple. We're not really trying to identify what purpose the particular package is by the name that we attach to it, just rather identifying it by number, and it allows you a little bit more flexibility, I think, in what might be included in a particular package as it's issued to the contractor.
Yes, and I think the fact that the word issue does sort of imply that there is more than one group of documents. So that's a good clean term and a useful term. And then my favorite is this one. I like it because the word work relates to the defined contract term the work, but it implies that this is only a portion of the work. And as I say, sometimes you see construction package as an alternative terminology. And like Tommy mentioned, I don't know that it makes a great lot of difference what we call these things as long as we're reasonably consistent. And I believe that we probably do need to put a definition of whatever term we use into the specifications.
Louis, when you're
yes.
using these terms, are you normally putting another name associated with it? For instance, foundations work package or
only as
superstructure?
Only as a sort of subtitle. I agree with you that the primary thing is WP1, work package 1, work package 2, and then you might have a thing that is foundations, it's shell, it's interior build out. I've done some projects where we had as many as 14 or 15 work packages, and believe me, getting titles for all of those was sometimes problematical because there were a lot of strange bedfellows. You know, they weren't necessarily a group of related things. They were just a group, an unrelated group of documents or things that were going to be built at about the same time. So I quite agree with you. The main thing is the number, and then any explanatory document, and we're going to look at one of those, is just kind of a subtitle that maybe helps people on a mnemonic remember which one is which.
I had a question from Larry Whitlock. He asked, does consensus docs address the issue of designating multiple packages?
I don't know. David, do you know?
What was the, I missed the first word. I'm sorry, Jessica.
He asked if consensus docs cover this issue, the problem of multiple work packages or whatever.
I don't know that. I have not had a project done using consensus docs yet, and have not had an opportunity to really review those in detail.
Nor have I. So Jessica, make sure that Larry gets a gold star for stumping David and myself.
And
we will expect him to look it up and report to us in our January meeting.
Yeah, does Larry know? Do you know the answer, Larry? Is he on audio, Jessica, or just typing questions?
He typed in a question. He said no, he does not know.
Oh, okay. Well.
Okay. All right. There are two basic approaches to handling multiple work packages, and they're variations on a theme, but they really kind of fall into two basic categories. You have standalone work packages and cumulative documents. Now, by standalone work packages, what I mean is that you have a set of drawings and a set of specifications, and they remain in their form throughout the rest of the project. They're not revised as such. The problem with that then is that you wind up with multiple versions of sealed documents that don't have revisions tracked on them. And that may sound like an unusual approach, but I have in fact seen this done. One of the things that people sometimes I've seen done is that on the drawings that they will actually put the lines representing work that was done in a previous work package. They will put those on a layer that makes it go gray so that it doesn't print black when you print these things out in the drawings out in black and white, and only the stuff that's in the current package prints as being bold or dark. So anything future or past is grayed out. To do that takes a huge amount of work, and the one large project where I saw that approach being used, there were so many mistakes that it was very misleading anyway, and it really wasn't worth the trouble or the cost to try to do it. And on that project, the contractor even said, "That's not what I want," but for some reason or other, the project architect was insistent on doing it in that way. So that requires a lot of extra maintenance to keep all the documents straight. Yes, Dave.
Okay, I was just going to ask if that was something where if the documents were written specific to a particular package and issued essentially as a frozen point in time, then the next package essentially ignores what has previously been done and starts again anew for the next work group. Wouldn't that eliminate some of that overlap, and wouldn't that be a reasonable approach?
Oh, it does, and that's an excellent point. And you do sometimes see this approach taken, and it's not too bad if it's used for one or two early release packages, where the drawings and the spec sections are not going to be developed any further. In other words, they're essentially the final version. So you can have a standalone site development project, and you know that those things are not going to be changing. But
right.
If you're going to have, if the design is going to be more flexible and things are going to change in the future, then it can be very difficult to manage one of these.
Yeah,
I have a question by Raymond Flouter. Go ahead, Raymond.
Hi, Raymond.
He also typed in a question. Perhaps he doesn't get audio, or
okay.
His is more of a thought. He said consensus documents, I believe, are going to be used more with lead work and international projects. This is fairly new.
We will see. That remains to be seen. Dave pointed out to me earlier this week that CSI has endorsed the consensus docs, or at least a group of them, and we CSI members now get a cost break on buying them, a 20% discount. But we'll see how they rival the AIA documents that have been the kind of the standard for over 100 years.
Right. That'll be an interesting thing to watch, because the roles under consensus docs are not quite the same as they are under AIA, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
There are substantive differences that unfortunately we don't. This is not the right time to discuss it, but right. It is a fascinating subject. The cumulative documents, on the other hand, are pretty much the way most people approach drawings and specifications, is that we realize that as the work evolves, there are going to be revisions, and so we invented the revision block on the title block of the drawings, so that we can record the various revisions, because we all know there are going to be changes made. And so those are the two basic approaches. And let's take our second polling question, Jessica.
Okay.
And that question is, which document issue do you use? And choose one.
And while they're trying to complete this poll list, I just wanted to say I'm thinking a project I'm just now starting and looking at the standalone approach for the documents, that the project I have is probably a perfect fit for that kind of an application. It's the first package will be demolition of an existing building. It's a complete demolition. So the work that we're going to show on those documents and the specs for that demolition work will not be reused on any future package.
Right.
Second,
it's like a booster rocket that gets the payload into orbit and then just falls down and falls into the ocean.
Right. So, and then our second package will be the pilings, since we're sitting right on the bay. That's the only way to support the building. And again, that's simply just going out driving the wood pilings, and nobody will be using any of that work again, or it won't show up anywhere else in the document. So those are easy kinds of things that you can break out as standalone packages and set the drawings and the specs to show only that particular scope of work.
But see, I have seen drawings where, for example, on foundations, where they'll do one portion of the building and issue that as a work package, and then they issue another set of drawings that shows the rest of the building, because only one wing or something was done in the first work package, and it's not actually a revision. They use the same drawing number, but you have to know that it belongs with work package 2, and so you have two live documents. They're both sealed, but they have different content, and I think that's a liability and a management nightmare.
Okay, Louis, can you see the results?
From the poll today?
Actually, no, I can't.
Okay, so here they are.
So you read them to me.
Okay, 45% say they use standalone packages with separate documents.
Okay.
We don't have an overwhelming majority. 52% say they're using cumulative documents, and 3% are using something else entirely.
Ah.
If some of those 3% out there are willing to speak up, I'd love to hear what it is that you may be using. Maybe the rest of us can learn something.
I suspect that 3% is one person. We'd
Possibly.
love to hear from you. Stick up your hand.
Yes, any takers? No.
All right.
Okay, maybe later.
Okay. Oops. I lost my place. Okay. So here are some ideas that I've been doing these fast-track projects with multiple work packages for a little over 20 years, and I've done several mega projects that had more than 10 work packages with 20 or 25 consultants on the jobs, and trying to juggle all the specs and keep track of those. I'm glad I didn't have to do the drawings, but track of the specs, I've come up with some ideas that have worked for me in the past, and I'm going to share those just on that basis, and hope that they might help you guys. One of the current ones, now I haven't done this for a long time, but I found this very useful recently, is to use Uniformat to take the building apart and break it down into the functional elements, and then assign those different elements to what goes in the different work packages. Again, I really believe very strongly in planning up front. So if you're going to have multiple work packages, you need to plan out in advance what those are going to be, not just do, okay, I'll do the first work, here's what's in the first work package, and then when that one's done, we start thinking, well, what's in the second one? I really think everybody is better off, the owner, the contractor, and the design team, if we work that stuff out in advance, ideally with the contractor, and a lot of negotiation is going to be on. But anyway, using Uniformat numbers works because contractors don't build concrete. They build concrete foundations, concrete basement walls, and so forth. And that's the difference. David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in case someone's not familiar with Uniformat, that's a system to describe the construction by system and assembly rather than the traditional 6-digit master format 50 divisions, so that we can talk about exterior wall, or in this case foundations, instead of talking about concrete.
Right. And what this begins to say then is that it helps the design team understand what items are on the contractor's critical path, so that it gives the design team some guidance as to, well, what do I need to be designing? What's important now? What do I need to start researching, and so forth.
Well, doesn't this go back to, I'm sorry, Louis.
No, go right ahead.
Doesn't this go back to trying to organize the packages also to be able to deal with the building officials, to be able to get those early permit releases, because we have to be able to deliver documents in a grouping that those building officials are going to be willing to accept. So here's a way to plan these packages to make sure they're going to be acceptable.
And it's a way to communicate those that plan to the building officials, because if we use the functional element breakdown, where we're going to say, okay, we're going to do these exterior walls but not these other exterior walls, that kind of thing, that we're going to do stairs in this one and elevators in that package and so forth, that's an effective way to communicate the plan very clearly to the building officials and get them to buy in on it. Once we've got the work elements or the functional elements identified, like exterior wall or so forth, then we can begin to break those down, to drill down, so to speak, and figure out what the master format numbers are that are the components that make up those elements. Because again, as like we saw up above, contractors don't build concrete. They build concrete foundations, basement walls, structural members, floor slabs, and pavements. Well, you can see that that list there in that second bullet could easily be, each one of those could be in a separate work package, but we want to specify all the concrete in a single section normally, but the actual elements that get built. Now, some of the ancillary things that go with it, for example, pavement markings, we wouldn't want to issue at the same time necessarily as concrete foundations. So we can begin to, like I say, Uniformat is this great tool for analyzing the project and being able to figure out what to do with it. Then we can take those sections and say, well, I've got glass in more than one work package. Okay, well, maybe the most efficient way then to specify that is to break it down into exterior glass and interior glass. You might even have a separate, a third section for decorative glazing for some of the interior design work that won't be designed, whereas the interior glass could just be glass and doors and interior glazed partitions and so forth. So it's a way of, we can think about these things and up front, and that minimizes the amount of revisions that we have to do to the individual spec sections. There are always going to be some revisions, but it can cut down on it by planning up front.
Well, one question for you, I guess, Louis. In looking at the broad and narrow scope approach, I would think that some firms, at least, would be able to say, we'll pick on the glazing since that's your example. Probably the most difficult selection for the glass is going to be the exterior glass for the insulating units. The interior glass, probably a lot less perplexing because it's probably mostly clear glass, tempered glass, maybe some fire-rated glass, which you could almost guess is going to be required even while you're writing the building envelope before you get to the interiors.
Yes, that's very true, and that might be an effective way to do it. On the other hand, if you're doing a project, the firm I worked for previously did a lot of entertainment and hospitality projects, and the designers were always coming up with cast glass and colored glass and dichroic glass and all kinds of interesting stuff that would have made it a lot easier for, it was a lot easier to divide those out as a separate section.
Yeah, you've got to ride roughshod over those designers, They shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Well, as Dave and I were talking about doing this presentation a couple of days ago, we were doing some coordination, and I was saying that, ultimately the contractor wants everything up front, and that I've worked on too many projects where, we issue the foundation work package or maybe the exterior shell package, and the contractor is already agitating to know what veneer is going to be used on the wood doors. From that, then, you can prepare descriptions of what can and can't be built in each work package. And one of the things that I am proposing, suggesting, is that we always have a document in our specifications for each work package that describes what's in it. And here, wrong one. There we go. And here's an example taken from a real project that I did a couple of or 3 years ago. And
okay, Louis, you're going to have to
yes.
blow that up for everybody so they can read it.
Okay.
If you can.
Yeah, we can zoom in.
Yeah, so they can get a sense of what it is.
How's that?
That's better. That's better.
Okay. I can go even higher. There we go. How's that? So this is called a summary of work package, and the format that I use is first there's you notice that I'm stressing, this gets back to David's earlier question about do the work packages have names on them. And this one does not. It's basically a shell and core, but you notice I don't actually use the name until one of the paragraphs here in the narrative. So I start with the first article. I have just a general description of what the purpose of this work package is to do and how it relates to the previous work package number 2. Then I have an article that summarizes the work elements to be included in the work package, and then to clarify things, an article with the work excluded, stuff that might be shown on the drawings, but is not ready to be built yet. And you can see down there at the bottom, I think that we need to treat specification sections very similar to drawings, and I actually put a prepared by, checked by box on many of my spec sections for many projects, but that's a side thing. Anyway, so that's the idea. In that first article, in the first paragraph A, 1.1a, I refer to a section, to the summary of work section, for some general requirements. And again, this is something that we could conceivably make available if anyone wants to send in an email request. I'll be happy to send you a PDF of some of these documents, but we need to have, I think, some sort of explanation in the contract documents about how the work is being divided and what that means. So you can see here in the first paragraph, I define what a work package is. It's a set of partial contract documents and specifications that contain requirements for a defined portion of the work and issued for permitting and construction. So that's one of the things that you can do to clarify, and that gets back to our consideration there. How do we communicate with the building official so that he knows exactly what is to review in terms of issuing a permit, and also to the contractor so that the contractor knows exactly what he can and can't build with the current set of drawings and specs.
And who's going to be responsible for defining these work packages? We're involved in some projects where it seems as though the only one controlling that is really the contractor or the CM. And essentially by demanding of the designers what will be next.
Well, ultimately, it's what's issued under seal. So it's really the architect and the design team really have kind of the final say in terms of what are they willing to seal, what are they willing to put their name on and issue for construction. But you're quite right, is most of the time that there's sometimes an unequal bargaining position, and we get levered into doing things that we don't want to do and designing things out of a logical sequence. And that's why I stress trying to work with the contractor up front early and come up with some logical arrangements so that the content of the work packages is in a sequence that relates to how we want to design the building.
Okay.
Not that there won't be some give and take, but
but to try to help the designers, architects, and engineers, that if the specifier and the design team is involved and is preparing these summary statements for each work package and reviewing those with the code official to get a buy-in, now there's a little bit more leverage on the design side to help to control what those packages should be, especially if the building official is already bought in.
yes. But ultimately, it's the design team's responsibility or their legal right to define what they are comfortable being responsible for. And that's the issue. And that's why I think it's actually the design team for most projects that should write the summary of work contracts of what's in them. Now, if it's a CMA project, a construction manager advisor, then it may, I have done some of those projects where the construction manager advisor wrote that summary of work package. And as long as there's general agreement between the CM and the design team, that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, I would agree. The CMA is probably a good one to at least have involved in the process, because at least they're not the actual responsible for building.
We have another question. Question from Thomas Smith.
Okay. Okay, Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
One thing the designers have to be very aware of, that when you start defining work packages, you're crossing the line to where you are defining the work among different subcontractors, and that's something that needs to be recognized.
Yes. You do have to be a little careful about that, because we don't want to say who is doing what. Interestingly enough, I have a couple of textbooks on how to write specifications that were published in the late 50s and early 60s, and they go into great detail on how to do that, how to divide up the work among subcontractors. And boy, am I ever glad that sometime in the 1960s, while I was still at school, that got thrown out of the window. But Tommy's quite right that we have to be careful in the way we word those documents, that we're not controlling or trying to control how the contractor divides up the work among its subcontractors.
We also had another question from Larry Whitlock.
Okay.
His question is, does this cause a problem for the architect of record by specifying the sequence of work, which I thought was determined by the contractor?
No, it's more like a general phasing, It's the amount of work that can be done with those issuing. But that's an excellent question, Larry, and we have to be a little bit careful about that. But and that's why, you know, it's really your best defense, so to speak, is that the content of the packages is worked out with the contractor up front. And of course, the content of the work packages, there's a sequence within that, and we're not necessarily specifying that, but that is something to be thought of when you're writing those descriptions. Good question, Larry. Thanks. My next suggestion is, if we're taking the cumulative approach, is to simplify things, is to keep one live word processing file for each spec section, and then take a snapshot, a PDF snapshot, as you need it for issuing with the different work packages. And here we go. We can see that we maintain a single Word, MS Word or WordPerfect or whatever word processing system you're using. But at this point, at this development, it gets a PDF and gets sent out for printing in Work Package 1, and here's the revision along the line, and then we void the original issue and the PDF, but we're keeping one set of Word files. Again, I have seen projects where they tried to maintain separate Word files, live word processing files for each work package, and it was very easy for the design team to get lost and issue the wrong section, the wrong version of the section. And that's one of the things we want to really be careful about.
You know, one thing too to be cautious of there too, Louis, just to, as you're doing each revision, that it really, because it is cumulative, it should be in effect no deletions from the prior edition, but only additions. Otherwise, you may be affecting the scope of work for the prior contracts. Yes,
right. We're adding to it. We're fleshing out and adding information as we go along. And my final suggestion is to track this with the table of contents. And let's do polling question number 3, Jennifer, that deals with this question. Remember, one of our challenges was, how do we communicate to the contractor, the building officials, and even among our design team ourselves, what is the latest version of any given document, whether it's a drawing or a spec section.
Okay, remember on this one you can pick any and everything that you use.
So that's right.
And Louis, just a note here, we're coming up on the hour, so we're going to have to try to... Right.
And, well, this is essentially my last slide. The last view. And we're going to go to, where is it? All right, there it is.
And as soon as the poll's ended here, we'll be back at your screen.
I'll just give it a few more moments to where we get a larger percentage of votes here.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate the input, because David and I are, we're hungry to learn too. And what's exciting about CSI is this exchange of ideas and information, and we really appreciate everybody taking time out of your busy days to join us and chat about subjects of mutual interest.
Okay, Louis, here we have the results. We have in the lead by far and away is the spec header footer issue date. Second, coming up in second place is a table of contents issue date, and then that's at 58%. using an issue number, whether in the contents or in the header footer, is tied at 24, 27%. And we have one daring person who's doing something completely different.
So, is that our person that was doing something different on the other question that we asked?
I would really like to know what the something different is.
Well, perhaps he or she will send us an email. Anyway, we have to go through this kind of quickly. This table of contents, I put a few remarks in here to kind of warn folks that the specification sections may have some content that does not apply to the current work package. And I actually use a combination of all four methods. Here in this table of contents, I highlight what has changed from the previous project. You can see that most of Division 1 was issued at once. Well, all of it was issued at once. We get into the product sections, and we now have multiple dates and multiple numbers. You can see there's a revision, work package 2, a revision 2, and I highlight the changes in the table of contents from the previous one just to make it that much easier for everybody. But I also, on the individual documents, will state both the revision, the work package number, and the current date. So as it gets updated and revised. I also like to put a revision table on my spec sections, just like the one on the drawings in the title block, to track the original issue date and then each revision, so that there's a high level of confidence that we know that we've got the right stuff. Anyway, we're right at closing time.
Oh, I have one question for you on this table
Sure.
of contents. You show work packages, but you also show just revision numbers. And can you explain what that is about?
That's occasionally you get a revision that's issued in between the work package, issued by a change order or some other instrument. It's unusual, but it does in fact happen, especially you get some of those revisions after all the work packages have been issued. So if work package 4 was the last one, well, in this case it wasn't, but you may have all the work packages issued and still be revising some of your specs and some of your drawings.
Okay, I understand.
So that's where we are. Well, again, thank you everybody for your attendance, and David and I are kicking around some ideas for next month, and we'll be letting you know as soon as we can here a little bit later in December, so that you can make plans to join us in January.
And we welcome your ideas, so if you have something that it should be a hot topic and of interest to the group in general, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, nothing cast in concrete yet, so let us know if there's some burning issue that you'd like us to try to cover. We'll be happy to work with you on that.
We'll even take volunteers to help lead the session.
Absolutely. This is by no means a closed party or closed spec.
That's right. Okay, so with that in mind, I guess, oh gosh, I've got to be able to read the calendar. It's January 6th, Thursday is our next gathering. Shortly after the new year, so we hope you all have a happy holiday and a great start to the new year, and we'll see you in January.
Great.
Jennifer, back to you.
Thank you for attending the December Specifying Practice Group webinar. Thank you and have a great afternoon. You may now disconnect.